Hello and welcome to another Connecting Consciousness update. It's the 1st of October and welcome to what's being called Red October. I never actually saw the film with Sean Connery in it, but most people are referring back to that. Lots has happened, and many commentators will say a lot has happened, and then frustratingly they don't actually tell you what's happened. Maybe like Charlie Ward, they've got 2 NDAs and they're very limited in what they can say. Or maybe they're just someone that spent an afternoon looking through a few websites and, it's easier to say there's a lot going on and just leave it at that. It's not very helpful. People need a balance of spiritual assistance and intel assistance, and it's quite right that we should try and run the two together. I made mention of Charlie Ward. Charlie Ward has 2 NDAs. So he's even more constrained than I am. And he's told me in the past that when he's talked about the QFS and gone into anything more than just a cursory detail, he gets a phone call and it gets told off, which, knowing Charlie, won't have that much effect on him, bless him. But the reality is that he's very limited in what he can say. Now, I'm not going to say anything that's going to endanger anybody or put the project back. I certainly don't want to be the person that forever and a day is fingers pointed at saying, well, you did this or said this and that held things up. But certainly we can see what we can talk about. So let's talk about what's happening militarily. Very important elections in Iraq on the 10th. And partly because of that, but partly because of other things, the Iraqi military have been put on high level of standby, which means that there's no leave. All leave has been cancelled except compassionate leave. And they've really followed their American colleagues because in a number of branches in the US, that's the same pattern. Leave is cancelled unless it's compassionate leave. 2 days ago, we got the report of a huge number of United States military, Air Force, being relocated around the country. There are always going to be drills, but you can't every time something happens say, oh, that's just a drill. Oh, that just happens all the time here. Something like 20 of the tanker fleet were launched in the space of 2.5 hours. And these are very large aircraft that can stay up for a long time and maintain 24/7 flights because they're when they run out of their flight time, the next one comes up on station and take over, and they refuel aircraft. So theoretically, it would be possible for the United States to project air power nearly anywhere in the world because they've got these in-flight refueling craft. I think strato tankers, I think. And that's very important because not that they're necessarily up there now, but they've been moved to bases that have a ready capability to turn them around. In other words, refuel them and the fuel they're going to use for other aircraft. They go up, they come down, and there isn't sort of an age waiting for the right staff, technicians, and the refueling. It's already there. So there are certain places in all air forces, but predominantly in the United States, where they're specially designed to have these turnaround timetables very quickly, and that's very significant. Any of you who have had the time to really look at some of the intel are probably partly excited, but also partly worried because you don't want to buy into it because it might not occur. And it's very difficult when we desperately want the right thing to happen, and then somebody seems to be, writing it down on a intel board or on a blog site. And we want to believe that. We really do, because we're sick of it. We are sick of this. And as Charlie Ward has said, and Charlie and I both absolutely agree 100%, just about everything really, but we certainly agreed on this point where we said that the game, we're going to call it that, the game that's being played out is not one that Charlie and I would have gone down. We wouldn't have, this particular way of dealing with what's occurred, we wouldn't have followed this path at all. We would have had a much more direct way of doing it. But of course, Charlie and I, we don't call the shots. We get information and we are involved with aspects of the Florida team, but we're not sitting in the Pentagon calling the shots. So what I think I'll do is I'll tell you what's been discussed. Now that doesn't mean that I am jumping up and down, waving a flag and saying this is going to happen tomorrow or what's going to happen on Thursday. I can't do that. What I can do is say this is what's being discussed, and I don't mean discussed on the social media sites or intel boards, because you can do that yourself. You can find that. What I can tell you is what people in the United States are talking about, and these are a whole range of individuals who have a little snippet of information. Perhaps on their own it means nothing, but when I put it with something that somebody told me yesterday, then that probably makes a bit more sense. So with that caveat, let's have a look at what we've got. We all know that October is the month where banks go down. Literally, nearly every major banking crash has occurred in October. And what was it, 4 or 5 years ago? Excuse me, we nearly lost Deutsche Bank into October. And they were, and I went public with it, and they didn't deny it, that they were within, was it 1 hour, 2 hours of going broke, literally. And then it was an Arabian family, or not a sheikh, but maybe a prince, who bailed them out at the last minute. It wasn't the Saudi family, but it was a very wealthy family who bailed them out by buying bonds. And I know that particular individual isn't buying any more bonds from them. So, October is always the time financially when the banking world is unstable. So if you get actions that occur around October, it has a far more dramatic effect. And it's not the go-to answer, because everybody wants to talk about Three Gorges Dam. They want to talk about Rods of God, the EBS, just about everything and anything. But, oh no, not that QFS again, not that money system. We want to hear about this, that, and the other. And part of me understands that. But what I must try and get across here is that you could have a military rule, and then after that, you could return that country or those countries back to a decent civilian administration. And within a very short period of time, they'd all be corrupt again. That's the problem, because it's about money. And it sickens me as a leader of a spiritual organization to actually say it's all about money. Unfortunately, it is, in the sense that that's the way that the 3D system on this planet works at the moment. It is all about money. How many times have I talked about, managers of football clubs who win? They top of the FA Cup in Great Britain. They have football, soccer, as you guys in America would call it. They win. They're top. They get the big silver trophy, and the next day they're fired because they didn't win in Europe, which is where all the money is made, on the television rights, the licenses. And so it is about money. And so if we don't get the money situation right, everything else is pointless. All right, it really is pointless. And people who don't really know the truth, they fixate on people like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and they go on and on and on and on, and they wax lyrical about it, post videos. These people are just managers. Rothschilds, Rockefellers were just managers. They were the storekeeper while the main man was out. And the main man was the Pato brothers. They really controlled the whole planet in terms of finance, politics. To a certain extent, they tried to get into the military. It didn't work so well for them there. Education, everything and anything. The Pato group dominated. And of course, I think in late 2018, 2019, the Trump team did what they needed to do, and that group no longer are in control. What Charlie Ward often calls the head being cut off the snake. The difficulty is that it hasn't destroyed the organization, it's left them leaderless. And so a number of what I would call middle managers have sort of stepped into the role not at the top of the food chain, but within their position within the ladder, the pyramid of power. And they've literally sort of gone into a vacuum. And it's these people who, without strategic direction, are now trying to maintain the evil side. And so it is absolutely important that the Sara Gasara is actually rolled out. This is the spiritual side of the financial change. It is the putting into practice the beliefs of people like you who really want to see an end to all the unfairness that's going on and has gone on for a very long time. And so I don't make any apologies for saying that it is about the money. Once the banks have been starved of cash, and if you've listened to me before, I've had direct experience where people in a bank were saying that they got no money. We know for a fact that the Fed hasn't been able to print any money for a year. The Bank of England hasn't been able to print any money for a year. And the proof of that is in Britain, the £50 note, which should have been burnt many months ago, the old note, kept in circulation simply because there is no more money. And there's a new £20 note that was due to come out, and that's just been held, and the old £20 note's being maintained. It's because this is bad money. It's money that was created under the old system, and if you were to burn literally tons of this and it's not being replaced, then you're in a very difficult position. And so the banks across the world are in a very difficult position. And what the bad people have always done is have either gone to the Federal Reserve or some such organization and said, print me money so that I can do a deal. Can't do that now. So with the reduction in the availability of money, the availability to do evil has been reduced. Doesn't mean it's stopped, it just means it's reduced. And that's why it's so important. There are a number of central banks. And in 2018, the central banks all signed into the QFS. They all signed for it, even when some of their governments were against it. And you would ask, why would a bank sign into it if the government was against it? And the point is that they knew what was coming, and they knew there was a lot of money to be made. If the world is going to change, you want to be in on that financially. Otherwise, you're left out in the cold and you'll have nowhere to go. And also with the redemption that's coming, they'll lose money on one side, the debt forgiveness, but they'll gain money on another side. The world will change. The fabulous stories of soccer players with huge amounts of money, earning £250,000 a week, living in these soccer star houses, many other industries where they pay huge amounts of money. These are all the rich people that we are pushed towards. Emulate them, copy them. And that really is changing. And so what will happen is that we'll see a shift of balance back to decent. That's a cat. Did you fall off the top? Careful. And that's a change because, instead of being encouraged to almost worship people in Hollywood or the Emmy Awards or the Oscars, we're going to hopefully, if things go to plan, be encouraging people to do good work. We'll see good people being rewarded and people doing bad things not being rewarded, a complete change to what we have. So, yes, we want all the physical things that we understand, like an EBS, your mobile phone, your cell phone being turned off. But unless the financial side has got a grip of, then it is pointless because the evil will just come back. I'm not equating it the same, but look at the French Revolution. The proletariat, the working man and woman, rose up and they supposedly chopped off nearly every elite person's head. So what happened? So the citizenry suddenly found they had all these French chateaus, millions of French francs in cost, but no one had any money to buy them. So what did they do? Can you guess what they did? I'll tell you what they did. They went right back to the very families whose head they chopped off and said, would you like to buy your chateau back? Would you like to buy it back? And so all these wealthy families who'd been either expelled from France, who had run from France, and whose head of the family had their heads chopped off, supposedly, went and bought their houses back. And they all came back again. So where's the change? It was all about money. It was literally all about money. So the proletariat who rose up ended up being ruled by the very same people that they'd thrown out. And time again, history shows that if you don't get a grip of the way money is manipulated and it's worshipped and it's used, it doesn't matter how many good intentions you have, you can't actually make a change. And so that is why this quantum financial system, this NESARA GESARA, is the most important change for humanity. All right, so that's that. Let's get the military side done. And remember, what I'm saying to you is not what I'm telling you is going to happen. What I'm saying to you is the people who are in those discussions about what they would like to see happen and moving the assets around the planet, what they're talking about. So what they're talking about is that our mobile phones, some point during October, will probably be switched off. The cell phones, as it is October, they will go off. And I don't like the term 10 days of darkness. It's used, but of course, if you're in a spiritual organization, most people are not. Most people are military intel, because going dark means, going off radar. I understand that. But if you're in a spiritual organization, it can also mean, nefarious things. It can be, demonic stuff. So I've always used the words 10 days without communication or 10 days off and on. Now, what is interesting is that both Becky and my phone, our mobile phone, went off for an hour exactly at the same time and came back on exactly at the same time. Now, mainstream media is not going to report anything like this. So it would be interesting, without flooding your poor coordinators with lots of anecdotal information, it would be interesting to find out whether across the globe phones have been hit. We know that a couple of weekends ago, a lot of internet went down in London. We know that there have been power outages right across, and these are tests. So I'm thinking that tomorrow is the 2nd, and if plans look like they've worked out, then the United States government incorporated will be bankrupt. They have passed a bill to keep museums open, police forces open to December. They passed a small one with that. But the main 3.3 trillion stimulus package was blocked by the Democrats' own side. But the real issue here is the bond holding. Every year or every so often, a government issues bonds which you can buy. They're not as volatile as stocks and shares. They don't make you as much money, but they're seen as very, very safe. And maybe every quarter the government pays you a small amount for buying the bond. And if you're prepared to do a 25-year long haul, then they're a good deal. But it looks like the US is about to default on making its payment. Now that means in law that those bond holders, and don't please imagine a dear old lady holding one bond. These are huge corporations. These are huge wealthy people in Arabia. They're people with huge holdings in the United States. The law says they can go and ask for their money back immediately. See, normally you can't. You buy your bond for 20 years, 25 years, or 50 years, and you only get your money back at the end of that period. But this means that if they default, they can go in, and that's going to break the United States financially. Yes, I know the United States is bankrupt, but it would publicly break them. And so there's a lot of talk that this is what they're waiting for. They're waiting for a collapse in the expectation and trust in United States of America Incorporated. And that could cause a lot of issues. It's rumored, and I have to talk like this. I can't say to you it will happen because I don't know it will happen. But it's rumored tomorrow, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th, there should be some activity starting to occur militarily that will even make it to the sleeping public. And then from that onwards, the 5th onwards, is what commentators are calling the 10 days of darkness, which we don't use in Connecting Consciousness. So that's really, really tight up to schedule, isn't it? So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So really and truly from sort of next week onwards, we should be according to the minds that are planning this, we should be well into this. Iraq needs to announce the revaluation. Anybody who's been in the QFS program or network, and many of you have been in for many years, and you made it through this far, know that you've been told that it's all to do with Iraq. It's to do with the revaluation. When Iraq announces publicly its revaluation, then things are really going to happen. Now, privately, the rate's already been set, but of course, that doesn't mean anything outside of the little group that needs to know or is aware of it. Now, they know, and they're dealing with it, and they know quite what's what. But for the vast majority, 99%, it doesn't mean anything. It's like yet another thing that people are telling them that isn't coming to fruition. And so that's really important. We need to watch for that. The International Monetary Fund, who everybody likes to attack, actually is playing a very useful and interesting role. The IMF specifically wants Iraq to announce the RV tomorrow, this revaluation. However, the American military don't. They are not yet ready, and they are saying that they'd be quite happy for the RV to be announced next week. I don't know who's going to win that argument, but I know that it's fairly imminent, especially the Iraqis have an election. So once the RV is announced, we should imagine other things beginning to roll out quite quickly. A lot of people put a great deal of stock on the Arizona audit. And I know many of you were very disappointed with what occurred. But unfortunately, because of the game that's been played between the white hats and the black hats, it wasn't actually the result that was important at that stage. What was important was what did the mainstream media do with it? And there was a chance, okay, it's a very slim chance, but there was a chance the mainstream media would report it accurately, which is what media is supposed to do. But the reality was they didn't. And if we think of Marine General Berger, who actually is in charge of the Joint Chiefs, not Milley. Milley was removed, although he's there publicly just the same as some of these other big characters are there in the public eye. There are always going to be voices at the flag officers who are saying, not really comfortable with doing this. Can't we just leave it up to the civilians? And what happened with the Arizona audit was that they were shown that it's just not going to change unless more dramatic action is taken. Now, I don't know what that dramatic action necessarily will be, but the Arizona audit nailed once and for all that the mainstream media believed that they were in the right path and they couldn't be shifted. And that had a very big impact. And that's why President Trump wrote the letter he wrote, and if you saw it, basically saying that the media have just literally shown themselves for what they are. They must have what's called the patience of Jove. How many times have the mainstream media been given an opportunity? Chance after chance after chance. And I know a lot of you are saying, well, why? What's the point of that? And I'd like to try and take a minute just to explain why. Remember, if you're listening to me, you've got it. You know, there's no doubt in your mind. But the vast majority of people don't listen to me or people like me. And so they literally are in their own dream-filled world. Now, and imagine that their cell phone, their mobile phone goes off, their television goes off, and they then get 3 8-hour videos running 24/7 for 3 days. And then the cell phone comes on, and there are 7 trumpets, which are the 7 presidential alerts from either Trump or more likely actually a member of his team, communications team, alerting people, etc., etc. Those people are going to say immediately, there's a coup. The military are taking over. And there'll be even spiritual people who have lived so many years with the threat of the deep state, the cabal, that they will immediately say it's not the white hats, it's the cabal. And so the good guys have always hoped that at the 11th hour the media would come in and say, yeah, okay, we'll play the game now. Because if you imagine these very sleepwalking people who on Tuesday told them, to do this or do that, and on Wednesday, the same person telling them to do something completely different, they'll do it. They'll believe it because that's the way they've been programmed. So it's a lot easier to get your message across if the civilian communication network is left intact. But what Arizona showed us was that ain't going to happen. So there's Project Odin, there's Project Starfall, and these projects, these technologies have the ability to switch off terrestrial internet, what I'm using now, you use all the time, and replace it with internet from satellites in space. Odin and others allow the good guys to go straight into people's televisions and show them videos or read out announcements, to turn off mainstream media, whether it's terrestrial or even some communication satellites, and literally tell the world exactly what's going on. The thing is that you're like me, we're done with all of this. We've been at it too long. But the difficulty is that we're not sitting, and I'm not sitting, in a room with 20,000 phones going, lots of screens, and being updated all the time with that information. And Becky will tell you the number of times we've literally been put on Amber Alert for something, can't say what it is, Amber Alert, and within hours of expecting green for go, we've got red for stop, because something had occurred in another part of the world which impacted or affected every other domino from falling. And it is the most enormous operation. There are something like now 130 countries where the military in those countries are more inclined to follow directions from Florida than they are from their own democratically elected leadership. So we'll have a situation where nearly everything's ready to go. It really is. But only somebody can hit the button or make it go. And when that happens, that is the point of no return. Everything will become public, everything will be obvious. And until then, we're living in this quasi curtain drawn room where we, all the wake and aware, we're sitting in this part of the room and we really get it. And that's all of you listening and the membership, and people who are not listening but are inclined to see the truth, and then everyone on the other side of the curtain who are just not even wanting to pull the curtain back. Research it for yourself. They won't even do that. And the difficulty is we can't just say, all right, well, forget them. We'll just concentrate on ourselves, because unfortunately this makes up the majority. I know in America it's been a tremendous advance in the number of people who are awake. But to be honest with you, in America, most people don't know the full truth or even part of the truth. Most people in America are at the stage where they're saying something ain't right. Something's wrong here. That's where they're at. So at least they're open-minded, but they're not like you guys sitting around and saying, well, the EBS will be this and, this, that. And they're not even there. It's just they're saying this isn't right, something wrong here. And, my argument, and Charlie Ward has absolutely said the same as me, is how much longer do the people who call the shots want to see what's happening? Because I actually think if we took a snapshot of everyone who was awake and aware now, and we didn't do anything public, we just, the usual underground type of movement, and we came back at it in 3 weeks' time, the number of people who would have advanced to the awake and aware stage would be minimal. I think a big jump occurred a few weeks back, or a month and a half back, but really, I personally now don't see the advantage even waiting any longer. I don't see it. I don't think the number of people who are going to wake up to the truth is going to be any more substantial in 3 months' time than it is now. And I think most people have had enough. Those who are truly aware of the situation have just had enough. And I do truly understand that for many people in the top echelons of power, they delight in seeing the foolery of Biden. They like it. It's fun for them. And the more fools he makes of himself and those around him, the more that the white hats love it and like it. And why would you remove somebody when they're making such a good job of destroying themselves? But the difficulty is that that game is being played at a very high level. For everyone else who has to live, particularly the Americans, who has to live under that regime, it's destroying. And it's not my job to make a plea, but the reality is, in my opinion, in my organization, enough's enough. It's now time to say, you've got as many people awake and aware as you need. Most people know something's wrong. They now need some action to allow them to get free. And I'm going to say something which nobody else has said, which is there has been a viewpoint that people only change when they feel pain. That when somebody goes through a difficult part in his or her life, they then work hard not to go back into that position. There was a viewpoint that if whoever came and made the situation right, people across the world, predominantly in America, would sit back and fold their arms and say, well, that's okay then. I don't need to do anything. Someone will always come in and make it right. So there was a feeling that if people were shown in the face just what a terrible state the United States was in, and how it was going, they might then say, I never want this to happen again. And they might then say, I'll do something to become involved, to fight back for the Republic. Because what was America? America is just it isn't all of these bloody quangos and these organizations and these agencies. America was really quite tight in what it was with the states, legislature, and what have you, the Supreme Court, I suppose. But I think people have suffered enough, actually. I think people have seen enough. Certainly in America, people are fed up with the war. We know that the sheriff's deputies have been out in Texas saying to people, if you're driving down towards the southern border, is a gun-carrying state, you need to make sure you got your gun with you. And if you haven't got your gun with you, turn back home and get it. And that's not being reported in the media. That's the reality of how the drug cartel gangs are now into United States proper. I'm not saying they're 50, 60, 70 miles, but they may be a good 10 miles. That may be a border now of no man's land where the drug cartels are setting up encampments. And so the sheriffs who are local, they know exactly what's going on. So they're warning people. So I think if you're in America, you know exactly how bad it is, even if you don't understand the game that's going on between the white hats and Biden. So this week coming, according to many sources, should be the start of something. I dearly hope so, because we've all been here where we've had the dates changed and the times pulled off, or that's had to change. And surely there comes a point where that doesn't matter anymore. We just do it. We just go with it. And I would say to the white hats that you've got to have a bit more confidence in the public. They will go with you. They will support you. There'll always be the crazy lunatics who run around saying the world is ending tomorrow. And if what people are saying is true, there will be some false flags. Well, there've been a ton of false flags. How many shootings in schools, universities have we had? How many bomb blasts have we had? We know what a false flag is. The people, particularly the Americans, have been through it, but in other European countries as well, and around the world. So, we know that. People have had weather warfare thrown at them. They've had a whole load of stuff. So what I'm saying in this podcast is that the people I'm talking to are pushing for action at a higher level starting this week coming. And whether that's going to occur depends on the person at the top, who decides whether all the dominoes are in place, all the checkerboards there, and the chessmen are in place. If everything's in place, they're going to do it. But it just takes one pawn to be out of place, and they say it's not ready. It's deeply frustrating. But remember that these people are in it for the long haul. They love America, and they want to get it right. So that's that. Now I better go on and take some questions. Are you there, Becky?
Yes, I am here.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I have to keep changing screens, right? Okay.
That's okay. Take your time. It's fine.
The first question is, so I've got two sources of questions. One is from my coordinators who are bringing questions forwards from the members, and one is directly from members who've written into the website. So I'll do a mixture of both. And this one is from an American coordinator, one of the state coordinators, who says, a couple of members are asking about the RV and how to go about exchanging foreign currency. Thank you.
Right, you're talking about foreign currency, so you're not necessarily talking about the Zim, you're talking about Vietnamese Dong or Iraqi Dinar. There are other currencies as well. If you're a member of the general public and you're not in the network, then you're waiting for what's called Tier 5B. Tier 5B will happen, but it has been pushed back. It has to be pushed back. Everything else has been pushed back. But Tier 5B is basically where I think Charlie Ward and I will do a presentation when the time comes. And there will be a website, there'll be links where individuals can go to what's often called a redemption center. It might just be a bank, don't know yet. But you'll go in with your dinar or whatever it is, and then you'll be given a rate. You will not be given necessarily the same rate as the person that comes in before you or after you. See, at the moment, you go to the Bureau de Change or the post office or the bank, and there's a set rate. That's the rate, and that's the way it is. But there will be flexibility. So you'll find that in some redemption centers or banks, they'll offer different rates. You don't have to take them. You can just go and find somewhere else. But remember, what we've talked about is that there are only a limited number of places that will offer this at that rate. So if you live in Iraq, you're going to get a much better rate. And then if you are, in the network, you get a slightly less better rate. And then if you're in the general public, like we are, and you live in another country and you want to go to your local bank to change it, you'll get a less beneficial rate, but it would still be higher than the rate before the change. So you have to wait. If you are a member of the public and you are ready to exchange, you are going to have to wait to be told when you can and where you can. Then it's entirely up to you whether you exchange at that rate. If you're in the network, then you either have historical documents to trade in or you have foreign currency. Well, then that's a completely different process. You probably have a paymaster or an agent who is acting on your behalf. And then you will take your directions from them, and they will call you in, and then you would sign the non-disclosure agreement, the paperwork, and then your monies would be exchanged, but not all in one go. It'll be over in tranches. So I rather think that the question is a member of the public rather than someone in the network. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Danilo from Argentina says, do we need to save food like some patriots are informing, or is this just for the USA and Europe?
Well, for the last 5-6 years, I've been saying to people, and I know it's a hard call, but put 2 weeks or so food away, water away. If you've got pets, put 2 weeks worth or so of animal food away, and have a means to cook it on, some gas canisters and a portable stove. And it makes very good sense, even in ordinary times, to do so. Now, people who live in the mountains, they have a store anyway, or rural area. They know in winter you can't get a truck through. So they're naturally in the habit. People who are preppers, they're naturally in the habit. But the vast majority of people who are sleepwalking, they go into the local store or the supermarket, and they buy what they want, and they come out, and they think the world will always be like that. Look what's happening. I went on my site, and I warned everybody before nearly anybody else that there was going to be a real problem with the petrol, And I even said, I think it was on a Friday or a Saturday, the government had a secret Cobra meeting, and they were going to bring the army in. That didn't come out until 2 days ago. We were right on the button with that. And the other thing is, we're all being lied to, because the government has said, we've got civilians to drive the lorries. No, they haven't. They've got soldiers to drive them, and they've told the soldiers, get out of your military uniform, put your ordinary clothes on, because we don't want people to know the military are delivering. So next time you see a tanker driver, look how short is his hair. Because if his hair is really short, he's a soldier in civilian clothes. Now, they have gone and got retired people. They've got people who drive HGVs for local authorities, and they've sort of bussed them all in, and they're taking them off and putting them on tanker delivery. I can also tell you at that meeting, they said they asked the military to put forward a report as to whether they could also deliver food to supermarkets at the same time as fuel, and the military said no, it couldn't. It said it's too stretched. It can certainly deliver food, or it can certainly deliver to the major supermarkets, but it couldn't do both. And that's why all the media, news media, have been told to talk it down. Oh, there's plenty of fuel, there's no problem. There's only one petrol station closed, it's perfectly fine. It's not fine. If you've got a motor car, you know as well as I do that you have to drive around and round to find anywhere that's got any fuel. You've seen the forecourts taped off, and yet the government is absolutely determined to tell you this is just a small problem. It isn't. It's part of a problem coming. So my advice is, as it always has been, put some food away, some water away, and be prepared for 2 or 3 weeks of intermittent disruption. Thank you, Becky.
Okay, thank you. Right. Ivania from Nicaragua says, seeing the great poverty that exists in the countries of Central America, how would the benefit of GESARA reach the people, considering that more than half of the population do not have bank accounts and they can't read or write?
I bet you most of them have got a mobile phone, and that's not rude, because most people in India who don't have a bank account have a phone. That's a fact. Most people in India do not have bank accounts, but they have a mobile phone. And so the way that it's going to roll out will be banking on your phone. That's actually coming. You can do it to some extent now. I'm not talking about Apple Pay. I'm talking about your bank account properly on your phone. And there are a number of QFS banks, QFS compliant banks, which give you an app so that you can look at your account on your mobile phone. This is the way it will go. However, you have to have a bank account. And so what's going to happen is that many of these people will actually be given money to start off with, and a bank account, literally. It's part of what we call the debt forgiveness. And this is very difficult for people in the Western industrialized world to grasp the poverty. We see it on television, but most people become blanked to it. You see starving children, you see, destitute women, you see all of these things. And every Christmas, some bloody agency, corrupt agency, trying to get money out of you will bombard you with the most horrible pictures they can find in order to bend you to giving them some money. So rather than do that, what the Nisara GESARA is about is a saying to governments, you've got to switch your emphasis. And we appreciate that many of these governments just don't have the money. The reason they don't have the money is because other governments have robbed them blind. Why is there so much poverty in Africa? Could it be anything to do with all the diamonds that were in there, or the oil, or other minerals that other countries and other governments over tens of scores of years have stolen and robbed? Think about the First World War, the Second World War. The reasons that we were given for those wars are lies. So if we really get to grips with it and we understand that everything is manipulated, if we can say to a government, here is enough money to house and feed and start real employment for the people, but we've got a caveat with this money, and that is we can track it. And if you start buying guns with it, or you start doing anything corrupt with it, we'll take it off you and we'll arrest you. That's why we need these 130 military forces in different countries to enforce the beginnings of Nasara Jasara. In other words, you can't just talk about it, you've got to do it, which actually means getting money in there. It means money to people you trust. And many of these governments actually are okay once the top tiers have been wiped out and removed. And it can happen. So that's it. We don't trust the same old NGOs. We don't trust the same old agencies. We don't trust many people in government. We have to find a clean way of bringing in life-changing, positive actions for people. And Africa, parts of India, parts of Asia, and even at home in Europe, Britain, there are pockets of poverty and there's no excuse for it. Absolutely no excuse. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, will they benefit from projects that will be carried out?
If they don't, something has gone terribly wrong. Some projects will just be for very small communities. Some projects will be really large. I mean, for instance, one project is to buy a bank. One project is to buy a gold mine or a diamond mine. Therefore, what we would expect is the workers in that bank or that diamond mine to suddenly find their wages being increased. They're still going to do the same work, but they're actually going to be treated far better. There'll be other projects set up which might help mothers with malnourished children, babies. There might be projects set up that bring employment to an area. All of these things. There is so much that needs to be done. I can't describe it to you. The depth of poverty on this planet, because the evil elite treat people like trash. And because they treat people like trash, they treat people worse than cattle. And so what they say is the value of these people in Africa or India is minimal to us. We're not interested. So we're going to take everything out of that country and we'll just destroy it because we are interested in this country or that country. And that has gone on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And that simply isn't acceptable. But they get away with it because they have the levers of power. What is occurring and has occurred since President Trump took office is a gradual removal of these people and their ideology. And so that's where we have to go through. So yes, and CC will be one of those organizations, God willing, that will get us actually deliver really good projects, and not just for the cameras, not just for the glossy Forbes magazine, not just for the sound bites or the snippets on Twitter or YouTube. I don't want any of that publicity. What I want to do is to change the world for better, to actually, how we're sick of these pictures of these film stars who go in and they shake a hand of some black person, and I'm saying that deliberately, being in India or Africa or somewhere, and then they get all the photographs of it, and it's very patriarchal, I'm opening this or I'm doing that. And the reality is they're not. That money's just coming back to them. Think about the Clinton Foundation. They put £1 million in one foundation and they say how fantastic the work they're doing. Then that foundation sends that money to somewhere else, and then the Clintons run around to another part of the world. We put $1 million in, and so 10 weeks later they put 1 million in, but they're claiming they put 10 million in because they've done all, and that's just the game that's played. And I just wish more people would realize it. There are animal charities here in Britain that I won't touch. I mean, I don't know if it's the truth now, but the RSPCA had a rule that if they didn't sell a dog or a cat that had been given to them over a period of time, they'd put it down, even if it was perfectly healthy. So it'd be interesting for the RSPCA to make a comment on that, whether that is still the case now, because to me that's absolutely disgusting. I will only support, and I give money every month to pet charities that rehome or foster animals. You should only put an animal down if it's in pain and can't be saved. You should never put an animal down because you don't make money on it. That's what I said earlier. It's about money. Everything's about money. If we can get a hold of the value, the fake value that money is given, we can absolutely change the perception of the human race. Next question, please.
Okay, thank you. The next question is a slight change of tack. Eleonora from Mexico says, there was a time in my life when I used to wake up feeling depressed and absolutely devastated, and I didn't understand why, since I had a good life. Everything was okay. Until one day I woke up and there was blood on my back. I had a mark and I started noticing that those marks appeared on my back. Those were the days when I would feel deeply sad and even suicidal. Ever since I was a little girl, I heard noises like motors coming from the sky. I shared this with a friend in Chihuahua, another state, and she told me that she had similar experiences of being abducted. I started making a meditation and the marks on my back stopped, but if I forgot to do the meditation before going to sleep, the marks would come back again. Recently, it happened that a small ball started to grow under my skin. I can feel it. It appeared one night. My question is, how can we stop these beings from attacking us and abducting us? I know a lot of people in the area suffer the same experiences and we've had enough. So how can we protect ourselves?
You have given the answer yourself. You said that when you did the meditation, it didn't happen. But when you didn't do it, it did happen. That meditation, whether you know it or not, your higher self was putting a protection around you. It's not just a protection, it's about international, universal, multi law that says you can't do this because I don't give you permission. And things are changing. There are always going to be some groups that don't want to abide by your wishes or your sovereign will, but they're becoming less and less. And as we move towards the fifth dimension, and we are moving towards the fifth dimension, it's now harder for these rather evil entities to just get away with it as they did. So really and truly, you have found the answer because you provide a protection around yourself, which means that these others you're not prepared to waste the energy as they would see it in trying to overcome that, to do that to you. And they know that we are busy people, we have a busy life, and that one day you're going to go to bed and you're going to forget to do it. And they're always watching. So, you need to get into that routine. Have something on your bedside to remind you, something that will always make sure that you remember to do it before you go to bed. That is the answer. And when we move into a higher realm, it will be nigh on impossible for these things to do what they're doing. They have no right to do it. No one's given them permission. But again, like the elite on this planet for thousands of years, no one has questioned them. Nobody's tried to stop them except the individual like yourself and others who have outmaneuvered them or outdeveloped them. But because we're in a 3D, we are still here on this physical world, we do have to do this on a regular basis. So, thank you for that question. I hope that empowers a great deal of people. Thank you.
Thank you. And Yamina has asked, but in fact, several coordinators have brought this question forward from their members worldwide.
Okay.
What are Simon's thoughts on the Man of God, 5th and 6th documents, I think? What does he think about the concept of the Vietnam megacities? Thank you.
Well, yeah, it has caused a lot of intrigue and discussion, and I was on Charlie Ward's show because Charlie Ward was the keeper of these documents, and he asked me to share them, and I'm happy to do so. The difficulty is that the deep state have always planned what they call smart cities. So when you read in the Man of God documents, these cities, unless you actually are very clear in your soul or in your discernment, then you might think, oh, it's a smart city. First of all, a smart city is a city that knows where all of its residents are. It tracks them all, and it's on the street lighting columns. And in fact, if you trouble to look back 5 or 6, 7 years ago. I did a presentation on smart cities. I don't know where I was in the days when you could go and do conferences live, and I did one, and it was actually called Intelli cities, intelligent cities. That's how they first came out with it. Okay, and that's when Obama was president. I did that, and this was the deep state had contracted a company to work up how you would control and manage your citizens, and they came up with these intelligent cities, what are now called smart cities, because the word smart, is we've got a smart meter, don't we? It's the cabal's wording. They like the word smart. It makes people think you're clever, you're smart. And so the cities on offer in this document are not smart cities. They are habitable cities. Habitable cities. Charlie, made the point, but perhaps he didn't go into it in enough detail, and I will. We are incredibly lucky generally in the Western world. Most of us have a roof over our head. It may be difficult, but we have a roof over our head, and if we're lucky, we've got a job and all the rest of it. But there are cities with 10 million, 15 million, 20 million people. And actually, it's a new age dream which can never become a reality to put 20 million people on the land. Now, if I've got a city, and there are plenty of cities with 10, 15, 20 million on the earth today. If you take 20 million people and you say, oh, this is wrong, you each need to have a lovely little house, grow your own food, which is great, but you have to spread out 20 million people. Where's the hospital going to go? Because this may cover 150 miles. Where's the post office going to go? And it's a dream that Europeans have, because nobody who I've discussed this with has ever been in the planning department of a local government or the central government. Nobody has actually had to manage it. Now, I was a lawmaker, not at the highest level, but I know what it's like when you've got to say, all right, what's the water? What's the sewage, the water, the telephone lines? How are we going to put them in? How many people have we got here? How do we move that? Okay, this doctor's surgery isn't going to cope with this. We're going to need a new doctor's surgery over here. The fire station, that's going to need another fire engine. The ambulance station, that's going to need another ambulance. To take 20 million people and spread them out in this idyllic vision is just not reality. So what is planned is that a city that has a job for every person, where every person has the medical care they need, the education they need, and in the cases where parents are totally against the truth, then those children will be educated in a school where parents are awake and aware. They will be paid to homeschool them. Well, that's exciting. You imagine, a lot of parents just want to get their kids get out to school. But a lot of parents actually say, I don't like what's being taught in school. I want to home educate. And so these habitable cities are not prisons, because the trouble is that those of us who are awake and aware, if we're not careful, we're going to be in danger of becoming, conspiracy theorists, because we'll see evil in good and we'll see good in evil. And we need to actually ask our higher selves to discern the truth. Now, these cities are habitable cities where people will actually have what they need. Now, for those who are severely disabled, those who are very old, those that don't have any possibility of having a job, they need to be in a different location where they can have more intensive care. That's the reality of that. And so that was the whole point. Now, remember that the CCP in China are the bad guys, but there's a whole group of Chinese in government who are decent. And actually, they're the ones that are going to gold back the Vietnamese dong. So the dong is going to be gold back. Don't please fall into the old idea of the gold standard. That doesn't work. This is gold backing. It's different, and I'm not going to go into it now. You can always write to Charlie and he'll tell you. So China, the good guys in China, not the CCP, the guys who are part of this NESARA GESARA, they actually say they've worked with the Vietnamese government, and I can tell you that the Florida team, the Florida government, have for many years been in communication with Asian connections. People used to call them the dragons, we just call them the elders. And they say, this is what we want. This is what we want, but we don't want poverty. We want everyone to have a job. We want to be able to share the wealth with people, but we just can't have them over 150, 200, 500 miles. We are going to have cities so that we can put these resources in. So that's the thinking of it. You know, if you're lucky enough in Britain to live in a tree-lined street where you look out your window and you see a lovely field, this is the idyllic side that Britain conjures up. Most people actually look over a terraced house onto a car park or something like that, or another row of houses or a railway line. That's the norm, not what the media want to give you. But nevertheless, if we imagine that that's how it is in Britain, that's not how it is in some of these places, that people live with 2 pieces of corrugated iron and a sheet draped across the top. Okay, so if we can go to someone like that and say, we'll provide you with a roof over your head, a real job, medical care, proper education, they're going to want it. And these are not smart cities or intelligent cities, these are habitable cities. And it is not generally our place to tell another sovereign government how to run its world or how to run its people. You know, you in America or you in France or you in Germany, you wouldn't like it, don't like it when outsiders start telling you what to do. So we are pontificating on a moral point, and what I'm telling you is these are not cabal run cities. I wouldn't have anything to do with these documents if they were part of the bad agenda. And you've read the other documents and you've seen how one document explains exactly how the American government works, another document telling people how to challenge bad legislation. You know, it's in keeping with that. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Charlie joined us for a coordinators meeting where he got to meet our country coordinators worldwide, as we have very many now in every continent, which is really exciting. And he did emphasize, of course, that the intent behind the Man of God documents and the intent behind the Vietnam megacity plan is one of good intent and one of supporting humanity and being good for the individual person. It's not about control, and so it's very important that we consider the intent behind something.
No, it's a very good point. I'd missed that one out. I mean, basically, you know, if people are going to say, oh, there's a spelling mistake here, or that's not been written by a lawyer, blah, 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 well, they're missing the whole point of it. In fact, lawyers didn't write this. This was written and sent to lawyers, and the lawyers were told, don't correct anything. Just tell us what we can and can't say. So there were errors in it, but that was because it was written by people who were not, you know, didn't get a degree in English. They didn't actually, you know, go to lawyer school. They were people who were spiritual people who have been tasked within the Florida government to actually take forward aspects of what is coming. And for people to pick on this and pick on that just shows me that they're not actually reading the document, as you've said, Becky, and understanding what it's meant. Look at your lives now. Look at them. Look at all our lives now. Look how we are controlled. Look how we are pushed from one thing to another. How much freedom do we actually have? Pretty precious little. And so this is a chance for humanity to break free, a chance to escape the claws of the cabal. And I'm going to take it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a lot on the Man of God documents, but just one last one on this topic. And that is why man of God, not man and woman, or people or persons of God?
Because the person who was tasked with writing it has a very high spiritual position within the Florida government, and he was tasked with overseeing the project, and he is known as the Man of God because he is spiritually connected. And that's his wording. So when we call it a Man of God document, it's because he, this individual, was responsible for drawing it all together. So it's basically his document in the sense that he was tasked with providing it. And the reason he was tasked with providing it was that the Florida government wanted Charlie and I to start to get debate going, try to show people what is on offer, try to get people to understand as a counter to all of the negativity that is going on. And so these documents are very helpful because they map out where we are, I beg your pardon, where we have been, where we are, and where we're going to. And you know, if you're going to sit there and be a school teacher and go right through it, then you've totally missed the plot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this is from Texas, this question. Given that the QFS can detect intent, why would Simon even need to admonish those not to have greed?
Because it's about education. The QFS will detect a moment that greed occurs. If I can speak before that and change someone, then they won't make that mistake. So in other words, somebody might have a project. They've got an idea for a project and they've got their foreign currency and they plan to go and do a project. But a day before they go to do the project, they suddenly think, oh, you know, I should this money. Oh, I could do so much. I could go on holiday. I could do this. I could do that. And as a result of that, they go into that redemption meeting and their heart is not clear, their heart's not pure, and therefore they're detected and they lose everything. So it's better that somebody like me says to them, this is what we have to do, this is what we should be aware, so that you can guard against that in yourself, so that when you do go to these redemption meetings, your heart is pure and then you're given the resources to go and do good work. That's why I do it.
Okay, thank you. So we've got two questions from Ireland. So Terry in Ireland is asking about any update on Ireland or if you have any worries about Ireland. And Joni wants to know, do you see a shift coming soon or before 2025?
Ireland is two parts. I know we don't like to look at it like that, but it is in reality, it still is. My concern has always been for the southern part of Ireland, simply because it's part of the European Union and that's part of the cabal and the deep state. So I think that a lot of the rules or laws or legislation in the south is very draconian, and I do have concerns about the southern part. The northern part, of course, is still controlled by the British, and as a result of that, you've got two very separate ways forward. However, having said that, the military in the southern part of the island are very free thinking, believe it or not, and I don't have any concerns actually for Ireland in the future. The shift you're talking about, there are so many different shifts. Certainly that shift has got to be well before the date you've given. If you're talking about the shift into 5D, then that will occur, I would say, 1 year after the new financial reset.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question is from Johanna from Austria, who says, one question was about the volcano activities right now and how they are a part of the White Hat operations, or more like a natural healing event, and what to expect from further eruptions throughout the world.
Okay, well, when the volcano erupted, what we saw was the deep state, the cabal, influencing social media and influencing individuals who run Intel boards, and like me, for instance. But you notice that I never went down that road. And they were saying that the volcano was going, at that certain time, was going to explode, and half of it was going to fall into the sea, and it was going to cause a huge tsunami, which would engulf the eastern coast of America and part of Britain, and it was all doom and gloom and all the rest of it. And I never ran with that. There were people who were giving the date it was going to happen, even on some of the Dina Chronicle boards, which generally are actually quite accurate. They were talking about this is going to happen, and I never did that because it just wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't going to happen. Sometimes the Earth expresses itself, whether it's obviously with a great volcano show or whether it's a beautiful rainbow, but the Earth will regulate itself. And not every volcano that erupts is a deep state plot. Not every earthquake is a deep state plot. And this is why we've got to be careful, because we can become conspiracy theorists. You know, we stop looking for the truth and we start looking for what plays our narrative, the narrative that we enjoy. It's no different from a newspaper that just prints war stories or danger stories or fear stories because they believe it sells newspapers. And so often something happens and everybody hooks on it and they make a great big deal of it. Well, what happened? All right. So the Earth will, as we move into 5D, it will need to express itself just as a human needs to express his or herself. And so, you know, what has happened in the past is that weather warfare weapons have been used to aggravate something that's already there. How many times have we been told that the Yellowstone National Park will go and half of America will be destroyed? Do you honestly think that the white hats in the military, who have access to technology that most of you, you know, that Star Trek doesn't even cover, actually, but actually think they'd let that happen? You know, so we've got to have a bit more faith in people, because these people, they've got kids and wives and husbands and brothers and sisters and grandchildren. They have a connection to the earth, a reason to want to live. You know, it's only a handful of these completely depraved people that want everyone dead except themselves. So, you know, the white hats don't sit there and watch something unfold knowing that's going to destroy half the earth. They do get involved and they do suppress it. So, you know, I didn't go with that story because I already knew that that wasn't what was going to happen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Austria is, it seems like everybody is very exhausted these past couple of days, and some members experienced a big energetic shift after the past full moon. How we could best hold up our energy in this time, as it is hard for a lot of members right now. So that's from Austria, but I do recognise that it can reflect people and membership worldwide.
People might remember 3, 4, 5 years ago, I talked about the Black Knight satellites, and they were done away with, and there was a big change in the way that mind control could be manipulated by the evil cabal. The last 2 weeks, 3 weeks have seen a number of similar satellites which have been influencing, sending basically a depressing energy across the earth, a bit like, you know, drinking neat fluoride, but in electro waves. And they have been either disabled electronically, hacked into and turned off, or physically removed. And that will have had a very huge beneficial effect upon humanity generally, but upon spiritual people most particularly. And you might be saying to me, yeah, but why don't I feel as light as a feather and jumping up and down? Because if you have lived for years and years, these satellites are not brand new. If you live for years and years under constant attack, and that constant attack is taken off, what your physical body does is go, oh, thank God for that. And you actually collapse almost. It's a bit like a school teacher who works really hard, and then come the summer vacation, the summer holidays, they're off school, and instead of jumping into their, you know, their holiday attire and going off somewhere nice, they just collapse on the sofa for 3 or 4 days because it's all hit them. And that's what's happening on the planet. People will be feeling worse before they feel better. That's a fact. So if you are feeling incredibly lethargic, really low on energy, actually it's a good thing in the sense that it shows that you're a very spiritual person. Your physical body is readjusting, and in a few days, week and a half to come, your energy is going to not just get back, but it's going to be much better, and your spiritual aura is not going to be continually bombarded by this particularly nasty group of satellites out there. So that's what I take from what you said to me.
Okay, thank you. We have quite a lot of questions from New Zealand,
Okay.
but I'll pick up on a couple, and then we'll try and do a couple of Australia if we have time. Okay, so
let's try and do it. I know we've got other appointments, but let's just
Okay, so
I'm really
I'm really interested to know if Simon has any idea about the future border between Australia and New Zealand, and whether it could be open again in the next 3 to 6 months.
Well, it better be, or we're all done. We're all done for. You know, when America, Australia, and Britain signed the Defence Pact to supposedly provide nuclear-powered submarines, that's a load of nonsense. It was really a defence pact, and I can tell you that 1 minute after that live conference was done, American soldiers were pouring into aircraft and going to Australia. They're going to open a couple of United States Air Force bases and a big naval base, and it's a direct warning to China to keep out of Australia. And the United States military are going to have working with the Australian government, of course, have a very strong position. Why was Britain there? Britain was there because we were handing Australia to America. The Commonwealth is dead. The Queen does not have that position anymore, and so it's a symbolic release of servitude. Well, the people of Australia can now go and be a proper republic. The only difficulty in it, and you know, you picked up problems with the Man of God documents, because military people, while they're spiritual, they're patriots first and foremost. They don't actually have the nuance that they perhaps need when dealing with the civilians. And so what they said with Australia was Australia and the islands. The problem is nobody told New Zealand. I think the guy there got one day notice, if that. And yeah, New Zealand's an island, but it's a country. And so when they talked about Australia being in on this group, nobody thought to ask New Zealand. Now they've got in with it, of course they have, because they don't want the Communist Party of China swallowing them up. But what we will find is that Australia and New Zealand will be considered one republic, if you like. Yeah, there'll be sovereign governments, but there'll be one group. And I will not be surprised that they become the 52nd state of the United States of America. It won't surprise me in the slightest. If you withdraw the Commonwealth and the fact of the tutelage to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, you have two sovereign countries that are literally fighting for their economic survival amongst a giant called China, and they would very much like the protection of the United States. So I think they'll be offered, but whether they'll want to be the 52nd state, I really don't know. But it makes sense because Hawaii is the 51st state, so you're moving to another island. I was very positive. It's a very good move, and all those leaders, those three leaders, it was made very clear to them that this had to be something they signed up to. Okay, next question.
Okay, thank you. Another one from New Zealand, which I know is a big question out there at the moment.
Okay.
I am concerned about when this tyranny will end. How bad is New Zealand going to get? Our beautiful, innocent children are now being jabbed, etc. Yeah. All my daughter's friends have had their first jab because of the vaccine passport, except at this stage, and a pregnant workmate. I know we don't have a crystal ball, but some reassurance would be appreciated. Thank you.
Well, right, two things. First of all, I have no idea why a government would forcibly do this, either because they are completely brainwashed into believing they're doing something good for their people, or they are utterly evil. It's got to be one of the two. It's got to be one of the two. So my view is, my children are grown up now, but my view is that if that were happening, I would certainly withdraw my child from school. And I know that in other areas, my advice has been this: you write a letter to the head teacher saying that you absolutely refuse your child to have this injection, or any injection actually. You must make sure that the child also understands and agrees, because if the child goes in and says, yes, please, I want it, Even if you've written a letter, they'll still do it. So the child has to understand enough, unless they're really young. So you get your child to say that they don't want it. You go into school, and I get the principal won't be able to see you necessarily, so you'll see somebody else in authority, and you give them the letter, and you say, I absolutely refuse my child to have this injection. And you can say, oh, by the way, are you, when this is being done for the kids, are you telling each child this is an experimental drug? I suggest that you look at the Nuremberg trials and the Hague trials and say that I will sue you if you try to do anything along these lines, and I will be on your doorstep at 9 o'clock every morning to talk to all your parents, telling you what you've done. So I am not going to go down this road. Now, most head teachers, and the anecdotal evidence we're getting back, are phoning those parents and saying, someone's coming to the school to do the injections on Tuesday, Wednesday. If you'd like to withdraw your child on that day, they won't get the injection. So you have to stand up. You have to fight for what you believe in. And if it means going to prison, you go to prison. Okay, next question.
Okay, so the final question is from Linda in Canada, who says, since Australia has left the Commonwealth, things have seemingly turned even more sour for them and have become the most locked down in the world, and for no reason other than government control. I really hope what they are going through is all ending soon, but since we live in Canada, what are the chances that what's happening there will happen here, and how much damage will Trudeau and his flying monkeys be allowed before he is finally removed?
Well, thank you. When we don't live in a country, or even when we live in a country, we don't necessarily know the truth. The difficulties, and people who have stayed with me and listened to me, thank you. 7 years ago, yeah, I talked about a number of suitcase bombs, which are what we call dirty bombs, which are stolen from Mossad. And in fact, there was a Russian submarine some 20 years ago. I hope it was the Kursk or the Minsk, can't remember. But they did actually go down and retrieve the warheads. It was a nuclear armed submarine. They retrieved that, and they actually used some of that material to make bombs. But dirty bomb. And there were 6 of these bombs in these suitcase bombs, and 2 of them were in Australia. And I can tell you that a lot of the lockdowns were taken advantage of by the good guys, who literally and truly had to isolate certain locations and keep people indoors so that they could retrieve these suitcase bombs. And I understand that 2 of there were 2 there, were successfully retrieved. The difficulty was, it's not widely known this, that the mechanisms, the arming mechanism for these devices were old, 20 plus years old. So they relied less on electronics and more on mechanics. Now, when you have a nuclear device, you have a number of fail-safe devices, switches that need to be deactivated before you can go and hit the button. All these stupid films where, Hollywood films where they press the button and then you haven't got a clue. It's ages through codes and numbers and getting authorization from here. So these suitcases were very old and the mechanism was defective. And that was part of the problem, because although the good guys knew how to deactivate these suitcase bombs, briefcase bombs, stop it, you two. Dogs are hungry. They didn't know that it would necessarily deactivate. That was a problem. They weren't sure, but it was successfully done. And so what I can tell you is that there's a lot of good military in Australia and New Zealand, but in Australia, that's the question. And that lockdown worked very nicely for them. Canada is right on the border with the US. Most of the military in Canada are under the control of the United States of America. Shouldn't worry too much. Trudeau isn't, I wouldn't have any time for him at all. He needs to go. The people with him need to go. There will be a clear out of these people, because people deserve the very best leadership. And if they don't get the very best leadership, then those people should be replaced, and people with a good heart, good intent, and a true believer in humanity. They're the people that should actually come in. You don't necessarily need someone who's had 30 years in government. In fact, what we've seen in Washington is that doesn't work at all. Sometimes it's better to get somebody in who's completely different. Now, don't laugh. In Great Britain, a number of years ago, Tony Blair, who was the Prime Minister, decided that he liked the idea of elected mayors. Might be shocking to the Americans to learn that before then we never had elected mayors. Mayors were appointed by the political party that ruled in that area. And so in a number of places, they had a mayor. And in Hartlepool, all the main political parties, of course, put their mayor forward. And who won it? The guy who every soccer match used to come up dressed as a monkey, the Hartlepool monkey. So he put a big monkey suit on, went out, half time, did all the dancing, and he won and became the mayor of Hartlepool. And he won a second term of office as well. Now, what does that tell you? What that tells you is all those years ago, people were sick to death of career politicians, and they wanted a change. And here's the truth, that people deserve the best, they should get the best. And I think that what is going to occur in America is going to occur in every major country of the world. Thank you.